There comes a moment in a man's life when something inside him shuts off. Not anger, not bitterness, awareness. He realizes that explaining himself has never saved him. It has never earned respect. It has never changed how people treat him. It has only made him smaller. That moment changes everything. Not because he becomes cold, but because he becomes precise. He stops justifying his choices. He stops narrating his intentions. He stops begging to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding him. From that moment on, his energy shifts, and people feel it immediately. Most men talk too much, not because they are weak, but because they were taught that clarity earns fairness. That if you explain long enough, people will meet you halfway. Reality does not work that way. People do not respect explanations. They respect position. They respect boundaries. They respect silence backed by action. The man who keeps explaining is unconsciously asking for permission. The man who stops explaining has already given it to himself. When you explain yourself, you place others above you. You signal that their approval is required for your decisions to be valid. You open negotiations where none are needed. You give people leverage over your time, your energy, and your direction. This is why over-explaining always backfires. Not because your logic is wrong, but because the act itself lowers your perceived value. A man who knows where he is going does not argue about the path. He walks it. Why silence creates power. Silence is not passive. It is controlled force. When you stop filling every gap with words, people project onto you. They wonder, they reassess, they listen more carefully. Silence shifts the burden of interpretation onto others, and most people are uncomfortable carrying that weight. Men who talk constantly remove mystery. They make themselves predictable. They give away emotional data for free. This is why silence intimidates. It denies access. It forces people to read behavior instead of words. Behavior is harder to manipulate. When you respond less, your words gain weight. When you stop reacting emotionally, your presence stabilizes the room. People start measuring themselves against you instead of the other way around. This is not manipulation. It is self-possession. A man who is comfortable with silence is a man who is no longer chasing control through explanation. He controls himself. That alone separates him from most men. The trap of being understood. Many men are obsessed with being understood. They explain their intentions. They clarify their tone. They correct misinterpretations. They chase emotional alignment. This obsession is a trap. You do not need to be understood by everyone. You need to be respected by yourself. People who genuinely care will observe you. They will connect patterns. They will understand without speeches. People who constantly misunderstand you are not confused. They are testing boundaries or protecting their own narrative. Explaining yourself to them only strengthens their position. The moment you stop trying to control how others perceive you, you regain control over how you move. You stop leaking energy. You stop defending your existence. You stop apologizing for your standards. This is when your life becomes quieter and stronger. Detachment is not coldness. Detachment is often misunderstood. It is not emotional numbness. It is emotional discipline. It means you feel fully, but you do not broadcast. You care deeply, but you don't chase validation. You observe without being dragged. Detached men are dangerous to dysfunctional systems. They cannot be guilted easily. They cannot be rushed emotionally. They cannot be baited into arguments that drain their focus. This is why detached men are often labeled distant or arrogant. In reality, they are simply no longer available for manipulation. When you detach, you stop explaining your boundaries. You enforce them quietly. You do not announce exits. You leave when alignment disappears. You do not threaten. You act. And action ends conversations words never could. How this changes relationships. The man who stops explaining himself experiences an immediate shift in relationships. Some people lean in, others fall away. This is not loss. This is filtration. People who relied on your emotional availability feel destabilized. People who respected you quietly feel validated. Romantic dynamics change. Professional dynamics change. Family dynamics change. The man who once over-communicated becomes grounded. Predictable in values, unpredictable in availability. You become harder to read, harder to influence, easier to trust. Women feel this shift instantly, not because of dominance, because emotional stability creates safety. The man who does not over-explain is not reactive. He does not argue feelings. He sets standards and lives by them. This creates polarity without effort. Respect is not demanded. It emerges. Where most men fail, most men try to adopt silence too early. They go quiet without inner alignment. That creates confusion instead of authority. Silence without clarity is avoidance. Silence with direction is power. You must know your values before you stop explaining them. You must know your boundaries before you enforce them. You must know your path before you walk it without commentary. This is why inner work matters, not affirmations, not motivation, alignment. When your actions match your principles, silence becomes natural. You no longer feel the urge to justify. Your life explains itself. The final shift, there is a point where you realize that most conflicts are optional. Most arguments are invitations. Most explanations are negotiations you never needed to enter. You do not win by convincing. You win by becoming immovable. When you stop explaining yourself, your nervous system calms. Your decisions sharpen. Your presence thickens. People adjust or disappear. Both outcomes serve you. This is not about becoming harsh. It is about becoming solid. A man who explains less moves further. A man who reacts less controls more. A man who stands quietly is rarely challenged twice. That is the moment everything changes.